in Seattle. Bruce Lee, when he first came to the States, he spent his battle. So he taught a lot of students that were very diverse, of all different type of races and ethnicities and creeds, and much to the consternation of his Chinatown elders. But he continued to teach a lot of these students who can, also teach to this day. So I started training under different teachers in James the Mao, in the Seattle lineage of Kung Fu. And that was kind of like the kind of formative experience in Kung Fu culture, but also just this multicultural Kung Fu world, where my classmates, my Kung Fu brothers were all like different races and creeds, and not just Chinese or Asian. And so that was something that I found was really valuable and impressive to me. And I think that was really kind of something that kind of set me on the way in terms of being inspired to tell the story, was also about these multicultural classmates who had thick as thieves, and were closely bonded, and not by race but by their passion and love for Kung Fu. The premise that we have is these three out of shape Kung Fu classmates who are now older and gone their separate ways, and they have to avenge their master, but they have kids, they have jobs, they have wives. So it's a very relatable idea and story that we had, and I think there was a lot of interest in, like you say, in the Hollywood and LA studios, but they wanted to change the cast to be white for what many reasons, that to make it more bankable, to get it more easier to put on the poster, a white movie star to put on the poster. But as you know, it's kind of a long-standing issue of these kind of race betting or whitewashing these roles that were, like I said, originally is based on my experience in Seattle that was multiracial, and we wanted to be true to that. And so we, said thank you but no thank you, and went back to our hometown in Seattle and raised through crowdfunding, Kickstarter, and all their investors were all like non-film people, all private investors, to get involved and support the film from that point. And that was I think that was the point, maybe in a little bit kind of a put a fire under our butts, and just inspire us out of maybe a little righteous anger to try to make this movie our own way, because I think that was something that gets co-opted very often. Obviously, we see all these work, that's has been. Genghis Khan was played by John Wayne. If people can imagine that, so Hollywood has this long-standing history of taking ideas, but not putting in authentic casting. And so that was something that we wanted to break, or at least not be involved with ourselves, and make our own way on that. On one side, you have kind of like the white establishment that want to take your idea, but change everything about it. On the other side, you have your fellow community members who are concerned about how we're going to be presented or represented. And there's obviously this long-standing history of martial arts cinema where Asians are mostly portrayed as henchmen or thugs or yakuza, or and just more one-dimensional characters, and especially in the martial arts realm. And so they thought it could be a little regressive, or what we were doing was a little bit, kind of back in the box of not really advancing our people or representation of our people. And so that was kind of something that we had to kind of work through, because it was like, it's almost like you're not Asian enough for Asia, you're not American enough for America. It's like we were, that like is what I meant, is that identity in rock and a hard place in the nutshell. But we love Kung Fu movies. We grew up watching Asian films. That was our inspiration and influence. And so we wanted to, be truthful to that. It's a very complex thing. And it's when you start to unpack it, it's like, it's a lot of, ingrained, how would you say, trauma, because you have a lot of these abilities to, representation or characters that are being written that are just so one-dimensional and stereotypical. But I think the difference that we had was that we were in the driver's seat and we were telling the story, as opposed to like letting Hollywood cast us into the roles that they've decided for us. And so I think, I think a lot of the community definitely came around to it.
Danny is a man who is struggling to figure out what's next, what his second act is going to be. I think for him, he comes from this past that, he's like a prodigy, the chosen one, if you will, of this, chosen family that he has with his brothers, Jim and Hing. And when we meet him, he's in a situation where he's at a crossroads. Like, How do I deal with family? How do I deal with all these things? And I think Danny is the type of like an everyday guy that, you know, the everyday man that we all go through is as people, trying to figure out what's next for ourselves as we get older, and also trying to figure out if do we still have the passions that we had, you know, when we were younger. So that's Danny in a nutshell.
Ahing is a sad individual because he really missed his brothers, his life. So he hides that depression through compulsive eating and jokes, but he hasn't been the same ever since his family left him. Like he felt kind of, and they've never really reached out to him, you know, because, you know, everyone grows up, right? And everyone, we can all relate. This is all very relatable because everyone has families, they grow older, job, life, everything. But this guy, you know, I felt Ahing because, you know, I've experienced certain things like that. And that's why he gained so much weight, because he's at home depressed, but then when he's outside, he puts a show on, jokes, this, that, you know, the bravado, but inside he's a guy that misses his family.
Yeah, Matt Page, we had in mind very early. It's just weren't ready to make a commitment with him, and he'll tell the story where we had a chat with him maybe even 2 years before we were making the film. We were big fans of his show Into the Dojo, and just we could tell he has great comic chops, and also just had the way the acting choice that he had. Like he came to it as an actor, you can tell, versus kind of a, you know, you could say a sketch artist or a sketch comedy guy. But he really, you know, you could tell there was a preparation and a thoughtfulness with the way he kind of makes his scenes in comedy. And so I really appreciated that. And we had a chat. We didn't have anything yet to really offer, but it was just kind of like, hey, how do you do? This is who we are. And so I think we, you know, 2 years later, we called him up and said we were ready to go, and he was available, and he was definitely down for the mission. So that was great just to have him come on board, and then, you know, see him and Ron go at it throughout, you know, sparks fly, and that was always fun as well. We definitely have the white cultural tourist, you know, that is a thing in the martial arts culture. I think if you ask anyone who's spent any time in martial arts world, you know, there certainly is that character. But it was wanted to kind of have some type of conflict for these three tigers, for this Carter character to be this heel, but also this thorn in their side, but also this reminder of who they were. And so, you know, we want to give it a little more dimensions than just, you know, this white guy trying to be Chinese, which he is, but there's also kind of more depth on the relationship with these guys together. And, you know, you see the sparks fly when in the film.
My character, I've read a few sort of like critiques on the character, meaning more so that they wanted to see more, know more about where this person came from and why they did what they did, or why they treated their situation the way they did. And it was a great opportunity for me to, because I was so close to the script, and I had been closer to the script, at least I had access to it way before any of the other main actors had. So I had an understanding of where these characters were going in their life and where they were destined to end up. And my character was, in a way, a symbol to help them understand their path, like their true journey in life, or their true destination in terms of their relationship to each other. So I felt really honored to play that symbol of a character. I think viewers listening to this, watching this, may have a lot better understanding after they see that, what I mean by symbol. But it was a great honor to have that responsibility to give the Tigers something to play against.
Ken and I have worked together on a lot of projects, you know, especially with him as action designing and directing for the films that I've had. So this has been a long conversation. As mentioned, you know, it take 10 years to even get the movie made, to try to raise the money. So there's a lot of time spent just sitting around, you know, chattering about what this movie could be, just between him and I, and figuring out what that would mean. And what we kind of settled on is calling it Shaw Brothers in a Street Fight. And so what that meant was we wanted to have the flavor of Kung Fu, the flavor of Kung Fu movies as well, with the shapes and just kind of like all those type of feeling of flow and Kung Fu that was just specific to the Kung Fu choreography, but also what that looks like in a street fight. And when it's floppy, it's messy, and you're tripping and you're falling, you're a little out of shape. And especially with these heroes, you know, they weren't going to be super clean, and they weren't going to be, you know, as you know, Gordon Liu's coming out, you know, busting heads. You know, these guys are like 3 steps behind, or, you know, trying to catch, you know, their breath while they're trying to get through all this. And so that was an interesting exploration of trying to discover what that would look like, because it was a way of kind of deconstructing a lot of that crisp and clean kung fu choreography into, you know, a little bit sloppier, a little bit offbeat. And just some point, you know, we had to learn and kind of catch ourselves to not use the best takes. For example, you know, there's an NG, sometimes the NG actually is the one we want to end up using. And so that's kind of the aesthetic that we wanted to go, so that it wasn't too clean and precious and perfect. And, you know, and that's part of the frustrating part that we want the audience to have. It's like, come on, guys, you're better than this. And so I think that creates, you know, a really fun experience with the audience to want to see these guys and root for them to try better, even though they're trying their best, you know. So there, it has that kind of like mussed up feel to it.
In terms of like specific roles as an action director, it was very important for me to understand his vision, his script, and to interpret that into movement. So everything that we did from the salute, the way they did the salute, all the way back to what kind of stances the kids were doing during their early training days, even to some of the prologue footage that you'll see without giving up too many spoilers. That was all the action team's responsibility, and by that I mean we were responsible for training the actors to get them to give off that kung fu artistic quality. Because if I just to kind of set up for them as the actors, they had such a diverse set of athletic abilities to present us as the action team, and we did not have a lot of time to work with them. So we, as the creative department, had to know specifically what we wanted to layer on to what they were already bringing to the table. There were a few things that we needed to polish, but we as a creative team had to be very, very sure of what we wanted them, what we wanted to draw out of them. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, though, that a lot of the kind of the artistic input to how the choreography was developed is in large part due to my stunt coordinators and second unit directors, Sam Locke and Carrie Wong, who were by my side the whole time. Everything you see on screen, they absolutely had input in. And if it wasn't for those two brothers, I just don't think the quality of the action would be at the level it is, what we reached.
What I found interesting, and I've never been a part of a film where one of the primary disciplines is martial arts. So this was all alien to me, and I don't have a specific perspective, or I can't compare it to anything else. But the one thing that I gravitated towards, and that Ken really latched onto, was the fact that, you know, my background in dance and movement is that there needs to be purpose with every movement. There needs to be a story being told. There's a rhythm. There's like anything with dance, it's like, how do we ebb and flow with the flow of the music? What story or what emotion are we're sharing? And I think that's something that, based on our conversations, he grounded that thought process into me, and that the movement is just the outward performative things that happen because of whatever you might be feeling at the time. So the approach was great. The training was something else. I mean, in terms of just having your muscles move and fire the way they want it to. But the one thing that's really interesting about this whole setup is that these guys aren't sharp to begin with. I think the only character who is sharp is the Hing character, which is Ron's character. But me being rusty and me not being in the sharpest form actually tells the story. It accentuates that story and that character. So it was great. I think we did like 3 intensive days of training, but there were voluntary workouts prior to that initial training period. And then throughout the entire shoot, it's like, we would be working 12-hour days, but we would still communicate with Carrie and Ken and Sarah and Sam about like some of the movements, like just practicing, even on the weekends. So thankfully they scheduled it that way, where we were shooting all the dramatic scenes first. And so it gave us a little bit more time as we went to rehearse and, on our off time to dial in the movement in the rehearsal. But that was my experience. It was great.
I feel like Ken, Sam Locke, and Carrie were were amazing. And, you know, and I've worked with Sam and Kerry before, because when times were slow back in the day, which there were a lot of times that I would also you know, design and choreograph fights for certain shows and films. And so there was a familiarity with some of the guys, and they were all just awesome the way they worked together, and also with us too, because we worked hard, but we had fun, but we also focused on certain characteristics of, you know, each person, and how they would approach in fighting and how rusty they would be. So it was very detailed, and you know, and I felt it was, like, for me, one of the best things reading the script, I'm like, because a lot of guys have egos, man, but I love the fact that, you know, I get my ass kicked all the time, you know. So it was like, it is different from what you're saying. Is, you know, as far as this is a different kind of fight. And for me and Alain, Mykel, like, yeah, it's being able to use that and really integrate it into the layers of our character. But for the overall comedy too, it's relatable to people at all ages, because everyone's been out of shape, everyone's been rusty, everyone knows what that thing is, and especially, you know, as far as getting older and stuff. So yeah, I love the whole experience, and the whole action team were great. Yeah, the Martial Club, they were more like actors in this film, but they were freaking amazing. I've worked with them on other shows as well, and I think the combination of just all our synergies, it made this experience so special.
Philip Dang, who plays the leader of the punks, he actually had auditioned for us, like I said, for that previous portion, the younger portion of the Tigers that we shot. He wasn't quite right for anything that we needed at that time, but I kept him in mind. And thankfully, you know, again, a year and a half later, I called him, you know, we'd love to have you, and we had that part. So that's a lesson in kind of persistence and always believing in what you do, because, you know, he thought it was kind of over, but you know, if you do a great audition, we definitely remember and keep you in mind. So that was kind of a great way to, you know, great news to kind of share with him. So Philip was great. He's got his own action team. He's a very experienced wushu practitioner, competitor. And then, of course, like you say, Martial Club is the two brothers, Andy Lee and Brian Lee. Obviously, Andy is probably most prominent right now, known as being seen as Death Dealer in Shang-Chi. And as you can see, now the world is just starting to see their talents. And they brought this incredible, youthful, young, flipping energy, acrobatic energy that was great contrast to three Tigers who, you know, are slower and lumbering and not as, you know, not as on the ball as they used to. So it made for a great contrast, especially with the choreography where, you know, the older Tigers are a little bit more grounded, like I said, and these guys are just high flyers.
Every time I see them move, I felt old. You know, and I don't. Also, we got to add Philip Dang, who plays the leader of the gang, right? So, and then Brian and Andy from Martial Club. But me and Alain and Mykel were just like, God damn, you know. And I had a chance to work with them before, like right before, about a month before, on a show called Wu-Tang, an American Saga for Hulu, and seeing them move, I was just like, damn, man, like, you know, it's like, are they on wires, are they, like, you know, it's just amazing. So Alain, I don't know how you feel.
No, it was the same for me when I didn't know who got cast for those roles, and then when Bao sent me the links to, you know, just to do research and see who we're playing against, I just saw Brian do this like flip, and I'm like, we're fighting these guys, like, what? This is great. But I remember the first day of training, and they were there for rehearsals. I don't know if you remember this, Ron, but we were in that sort of I think the gym, right?
Yeah,
at some apartment, yeah, your apartment complex. And you know, you go in there, and you know, you just finished doing research, and you don't know who they are exactly. But the one thing that really stuck to me was how humble they were, and how sweet they are, and how gracious they are. I thought that to be one of the most refreshing things, given the fact that, you know, again, they have that millions of followers and millions of views on their YouTube channel, and the fact that they are so gracious with how they carry themselves on set, and always saying, oh, hey, you know, they're very humble about everything. Those guys are tremendous, not only artists, but actors. You know, they want to learn as much as possible, and that's really inspiring, for me as an actor, to be like, wow, I remember that feeling of, having some humility and some to lower down that hubris and talk to somebody who you admire. And it was flattering. It was very flattering for them to come up to me and Ron and Mykel and be like asking us advice about like acting and whatever they might be. I thought that to be really cool. But they were, again, you watch them and you're like, there's no way I could pull that off. I feel like I would just watching them, I feel like I'd pulled a hamstring. So
they were so humble. Alain, like I remember when I did Wu-Tang, I was fucking around with I think Andy, I can't, but it was just like he was doing some crazy 3-spin hyper kick, whatever. And then after he landed, he was like, "How's that?" And I just went, okay. It's like, oh, really? Oh, did I not hit this? And I'm laughing.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun that day. It was the first day of the fight section of the filming. And so we've been filming all the dramatic scenes, the funny scenes. And the minute we started shooting on that day and the first take of I think, was it Brian doing the flip? I was like, oh my God, I forgot we're in a Kung Fu movie. Holy shit. It's like, oh, we're back to that, back to me being like 8 years old and watching Kung Fu flicks. Like, oh my God, this is going to be so much fun.
Andy, Brian, and Philip are incredible acrobats, incredible martial artists. So to see that paired with these character traits that we were bringing to the table with the Tigers, even prior to the day, we knew what we had in store was going to be so much fun translated to screen because of the contrast of styles, the contrast of abilities. So it was as much fun as it may have felt when you saw it because there was so much to, it's kind of a first big set piece in terms of like the Tigers in their middle age doing their thing and kind of showing the audience where we are. This is where we left off, and this is the new generation. Just kind of that collision of times in their life. So it was a lot of fun, and I feel so privileged to have worked with such talented martial artists in the Martial Club and in Philip Dang. So those guys are incredible. They're like machines. Like I remember asking Brian to do his little salute greeting, which is very athletic and very demanding on the body, as you'll see. But he did it every time, did the same movement every time, stuck the same lines every time. I guess it's a testament to their preparation on their own that they just train year round. They're incredible performers, and I really hope I get the opportunity to work with them again. Yeah. I mean, we were very sensitive to the fact that there were going to be a lot of people squinting their eyes when they saw Matt show up on screen because he's such if you follow his channel, it's hard not to see the mustache and not to see his mannerisms as a master Ken. So we were very sensitive to that. But at the same time, he is such a comic genius in so many ways, and his timing and delivery. We had to also let him fly a little bit. I think Bao gave him a little bit more of a leash in terms of like kind of going off the script a little bit in a couple of tries, a couple of scenes. And for the action, it came down to discipline and just, again, writing the story and making sure that this was the Carter. This is the Carter today, based on what we know from the previous scenes, the prologue and everything else that led up to this point. So because the script was written so well, it really gave us a good design brief to lean against. And it was just our duty as an action team to be disciplined to the script and also to not be afraid to say no when things were getting a little too goofy, right? And I think that came down to the edit, and that's also on our great editor, Chris Christopherson. Like he was the one that kind of finessed it to just fun enough where it didn't, break over the edge of just like, okay, we lost everybody, now we're in a different film. But it still gave Matt and the rest of the Tigers an opportunity to have that back and forth banter that you would expect at this time in their life with the history that they had.
There was moments where I think if anyone's watching this, if you buy the iTunes or the Blu-ray, there is a lot of outtakes, bloopers, specifically with Matt Page and Ron and their kind of banter improv back and forth, you can't help but not laugh. I mean, laugh. I mean, there was even moments where like the first AC is just cracking up trying to pull the focus because it's just hilarious. Like there's just too much. Every time we rolled, it was funny.
Yeah, I think the first day that we all had a scene together with Matt, it was the funeral scene with me, Alain, and Matt, and that was just because Alain would be telling me like, dude, I'm trying not to laugh. I'm like, dude, if you laugh, I'm gonna crack up because I'm laughing. I'm trying not to laugh at Alain's reactions to Matt, you know. And then with me and Matt, because I know I just was throwing stuff at him and then he threw it back. So it was almost like your mama, so you know, that kind of stuff. But yeah, but it was that day was like Alain said, like everyone on the crew you heard like, and then afterwards people were laughing. So it made us feel like, okay, I think we're on the right, you know, journey on this.
Yeah. That's good. A lot of fun.
One other thing about that whole set piece was that I feel like that was one of our best scenes as a crew, and just not just the performances they gave, but behind the scenes, like that was kind of a little past the midpoint of filming, and I think we had all warmed up to each other. We started to understand the demands of action. Director of photography Sean Mayor was really on point with capturing the action. So at that point in the film, everything, the whole machine felt really well oiled, and you know, we thought the pool was fun, but by the time we got on set with Matt and just the kind of the life and the color that he painted in for Carter was it was such a great experience. At that point, I was like, okay, we're really making something special. And that goes down in my memory as one of my favorite set pieces and favorite four or 5 days on set, just because of how much energy and how much enthusiasm everybody had at that point in the shoot. Not to say that the rest of the film lacked any of that, but that kind of, for me, it felt like we really hit our stride, and it was really starting to come together, and all departments were kind of becoming one big family versus sound, lighting, camera, action. We were all in the same room together, sweating it out, getting it done.
First of all, it shows the hard work of the action team, you know, as far as what Ken and Sam and Carrie, you know, put together for all of us, number one, you know, and number two, us as actors, you know, I'm really proud of Alain, Mykel, Matt, you know, the Marshall Club, everyone, just seeing everyone was hardworking, passionate. You never heard one person complain, not once, right, Alain? Like not once. And then number three, my hat's off to Bao, because he captured this thing that he wanted to pay homage to the whole Seattle martial arts kind of community that Bruce started, you know, when he first came out here to the States. And like all three of these intertwined together, it's a beautiful thing. It means the world.
It means a lot. And it really makes me feel like there's an appetite for it to keep going. People really enjoy this type of entertainment as we do, as much as I do, getting out there and making it, getting out there and trying to be on screen, you know. So it is super encouraging. I couldn't be more honored to be part of the Fighting Spirit Film Festival's lineup this year, and for that, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to get it get it on a stage where people that are going to this festival really understand and appreciate what it takes, what the craft is, and kind of even the history behind action filmmaking. So to know that it was well received really kind of warms my heart, because those are the fans that you're really making the film for. Everybody else is great, you know, all the aunties and the grandmas that might love the film and, you know, applaud us and say, hey, you guys did good in that movie. But it's the fans of the Shaw Brothers, the Golden Harvest era, the Drunken Master 2 die hard, know every movement fans. Those are the people that we really are nodding to, and we really hope understand the intent and the style choices and just the overall drive that we have to create action films and to hopefully leave a stamp on the history of Kung Fu filmmaking.
When I was an immigrant I am still an immigrant. When I first moved to the United States, there was a lot of things that I saw with my eyes that were strange to me. There was a sense of not being seen or being relegated to a stereotype. And there was a lot of things that occurred to me that I was like, oh, this is a different world from where I grew up. That I feel different here. But if there was one thing that I took pride in when I was a kid was watching these martial arts films. Because you saw, at least for me, I saw myself in them, and seeing how amazing these characters and these people were. Being a part of something like this, where I never thought I'd ever be in a martial arts film, let alone like a kung fu comedy drama flick, it's tremendous. I never thought I'd ever be in a situation where, like I said earlier, when the first day of filming the martial arts part, I just sat there and just couldn't contain myself. I don't know if you remember this, Ron, but I was like, we're shooting a kung fu movie. I just kept yelling it because this is so intense and so fun. And so I felt like a kid again. I really felt like the 8-year-old version of me going, holy shit, I am in that movie. I am in that movie. And so for so many people reaching out to me through direct messages or comments calling me Dicey Hing, it feels so great that people are seeing this character that Bao wrote.
I still feel like if you take the martial arts out of it, you have a great dysfunctional family story. So for me, I always felt like this was a great family story that had action, not necessarily an action kung fu film, right? So the fact that we could be put in, like Alain was saying, in the category of like, best action comedies and stuff, it's amazing.
It's incredible. Like I said, this is a love letter to kung fu, especially. And I think, other people that may not do kung fu can relate to it, but there's also those little nuggets and just those little experiential things that people who do martial arts or love martial arts film would understand. So there's, little Easter eggs and little shout outs throughout. So it's definitely, it's made by martial artists, by kung fu fans, by movie fans, and for exactly, people like us. So it feels like we're in kindred spirits, and we have an audience that can take to and understand and see, what we're showing them, and really kind of take in the full message of everything. So that's really special. And of course, with the UK, it's just like, like I said, with Shaun the Dead, and just the inspiration of British humor in particular. We do have me specifically has maybe a drier sense of humor. So it's great to have, the British side also be able to appreciate and partake of that.